Alright, so today we're talking about the more recent AVP games over the past decade or so, because those are the AVP games I have experience with. I'm pretty much covering every major release except for Dark Descent, because I'm not really into 2D games, but I did hear that was really good, so maybe check that out. Let's start off with Alien vs. Predator 2010. There's a few games called just Alien vs. Predator, I believe, but the one from 2010 is pretty nostalgic for me. It came out right around when I was getting into the AVP franchise, and it seems to really hold up today. It's not super ambitious, but it does give you a pretty solid experience of playing as the alien, predator, and marine. Trapped in this chaotic scenario, the human campaign is a fairly standard Xeno hunt experience with only one boss battle against a predator. It's done fairly well, and you do get to explore this cool planet that everything is happening on. The Alien campaign is pretty good and is a more stealth-focused experience where you get to crawl on the walls and ceiling and take out your enemies. It's sort of reminiscent of those cool first-person Alien shots in Alien 3. It's really fun. The Predator campaign is sort of a mix of stealth and action, where you can go stealth, but are more capable of defending yourself when you get spotted. You have a good selection of gadgets, but I do remember some of them being underwhelming, like the smart disc. Amongst the three campaigns, the enemies were alright, with humans, Xenos, and androids being fun enough to fight. There was this fun detail about the androids where their heads and chests were more heavily armored, so their weakness was their limbs. That was fun. Anyway, there was a lot of reused assets between the campaigns, and I know it can be used legitimately to show the differences between characters, but you can't help but feel like it was to save money every time they do it. There wasn't a ton of story in any of the campaigns, but what was there was fairly good. The aesthetics are good and help to build up this cool colony planet world, and there's a good variety of locations. There was also a multiplayer with an interesting 3-team structure. Having aliens, predators, and humans all in the same game was fun, but in the end the multiplayer was just kind of alright. Also, you could pick which species team you played on, which led to a lot of imbalanced teams, which was bad. Overall, it's a straightforward but good game, and I'm giving it an 8.10. Before we get into the rest of this, if you like sci-fi horror, check this out. What Happens After Midnight, my action survival horror game, is available right now. You're sent to investigate the town of Night Vale and quickly find out interdimensional forces are invading our world. Hop between worlds, meet strange characters, and survive cosmic horrors once you find out what happens after midnight. Also, any feedback is greatly appreciated. Now on to the infamous Alien Colonial Marines. People mainly remember this game for having bad enemy AI, but honestly I never remember that many instances of it. I even skimmed through a let's play of the game and didn't really see anything. I think the real problem of this game is just that it's kind of generic. I know I just said that the AVP game was good despite being generic, but this game doesn't really pull that off. It's probably mainly to do with it just being humans, and for a longer stretch. There's also a lot of human enemies, which that's not an inherently bad concept, and it is fun that sometimes you run into humans and aliens fighting each other. But with a lot of human sections, it did kind of feel like it was trying to be Call of Duty in space before they made Call of Duty in space. You did have a decent weapon selection, and even got to use the power loader at one point, which actually I think this is the only game I know of where you can use the power loader. Surprised that's not been in more games. There was decent enemy variety, with a few different species of aliens as well, and the level design was pretty linear, but alright overall. The story, outside of having a lot of retcons to the movie, was pretty generic as well. The aesthetics were just okay, but we did get to see a lot of locations from Aliens. Overall, this wasn't as horrible as everyone says. It's just kind of generic, and I'm giving it a 6.41. Moving on from the most generic Alien game to the most unique Alien game, we're going to be talking about Alien Isolation. Although I don't like this game quite as much as everybody else does, I still think it's probably the best Alien game, at least that I've played. I, in general, remember feeling like this game would shift between a 6 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10. So let's start out with the 10 out of 10 stuff. I like how this game sits in a relatively unexplored section of the survival horror spectrum between stealth horror like Amnesia and survival horror like RE2, where it's pretty close to a stealth horror but has some minimal ways to fight back. Your resources for fighting back are pretty few and far between, so you really have to consider whether or not the resource is worth it, which I think is pretty interesting. It's not like you can never fight back, but it's not common either, so that builds a lot of good tension. Because, you know, in a pure stealth horror, you're always just going straight for the locker. In a pure action horror, you're always going straight for the gun. And in a middle-of-the-road survival horror, you usually lean toward gun, but there's like occasional moments of needing to run. So that's what I think is really interesting about this type of game. And the only other game that I can think of that sort of sits in this sort of spot in horror is Amnesia the Bunker, where you had like only a couple bullets to fight out the monster and a few other things. So if you like that, play this or the other way around. There's not very good enemy variety in this game, but I do like the enemies that are there for the most part. I think the Working Joes were one of the best additions to Aliens lore. They're like a cross between Michael Myers and the Funland robot from Scooby-Doo, you know, which that's a fun thing. Also, the aesthetics in this game are very good. The environments both fit in with the movies and are very good looking works of art on their own. It's also very good from a visual fidelity standpoint. This game is 12 years old and looks like it could have been released today. Now let's get into the 6 out of 10 side of things. Everyone talks about how the alien AI has two brains, one that doesn't know where you are and is looking for you, and one that does know and is feeding the other one hints. And I personally feel like the second brain is giving a few too many hints. I had a fair too many deaths that felt unfair. And on that note, I also didn't like how sometimes the alien will be hiding in a vent in the ceiling and instantly kill you. It does drop drool down to give you some kind of warning, but it's too hard to see. My other main complaint is it's too long and overstays its welcome, and the long walking section, flashback in the middle, and multiple fake out endings at the end make it worse. In terms of the stuff that's kind of in the middle, the story's okay. The only thing that I kind of had a problem with was the justification of human enemies being that they just want to kill you because resources are super scarce, which that's kind of just doesn't feel that probable. Overall, Alien Isolation is pretty good. It just has a couple of things that are pretty irritating, and I'm giving it an 8.41. I actually have reviews of these next two, but they were a long time ago, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about them again. First, we have Predator Hunting Grounds. This is one of Ilphonic's asymmetrical horror games, and it was fairly good. The matches were basically the humans are sent on a mission to fight NPCs, and the Predator is sent to hunt them down. On the human side, it played decently well, with the fights against NPCs being a much better way to fill time until the Predator finds you than finding resources and doing some long complicated process to escape the map, which is what they usually do in asym horror games. The Predator was also fun to play. It had good natural feeling climbing, jumping, and fighting, and the gadgets worked well and were fun to use. The Predator played so well that it was actually really disappointing there wasn't a single player mode. If they ever do a single player Predator game, it really should play like this. Being a multiplayer game, there wasn't really any story, and also the aesthetics were relatively good, and I'm sticking with my previous rating of 8.29. Next we have Aliens Fireteam Elite. This was another multiplayer focused game. but this time it was a PvE co-op shooter. The actual gameplay was fairly good, but pretty standard co-op shooter stuff, shooting, using special abilities, and taking objectives by fighting off hordes. There was a good selection of weapons and good enemy variety, not just within the aliens, but there was also 2 other factions, Sims, and a new zombie pathogen sort of thing that had to do with the Prometheans and sort of reminded me of the Flood from Halo. There was actually a bit of story to this game. It wasn't amazing, but it had some good parts. The aesthetics were good and felt in line with the movies, and I'll again stick by my previous rating of 7.6. Lastly, we have Alien Rogue Incursion. This was a simple but good game with clear Dead Space influences, which is ironic because Dead Space has clear influences from the Alien movies. This is a VR game, but it does have a flat version. I don't know if it's as engaging as a flat game, considering it still feels a bit simplistic in VR, but I think I've heard people like it. It has good shooting and guns for the most part. Ammo is simultaneously very abundant and very scarce. There's a lot of ammo in the environment, but you can't hold very much. It would have been nice to get some sort of ammo capacity upgrade or something. There's mild survival horror elements, with you getting tools for unlocking new places and opening up resources. There's very poor enemy variety, but it still just has base Xenos and the occasional facehuggers and 1 boss, which really isn't much, even in a short game. The alien AI is unpredictable in a bad way, mainly the way it jumps at weird angles, and it also sometimes gets stuck. I do understand as a game dev, AI is one of the hardest things to work on, especially ones with unconventional movement, but it's still disappointing to see it not working quite right. The aesthetics were good, with good environments and environmental variety. I did like that they did the frozen planet. Kind of reminded me of Dead Space 3. The frozen planet in that was underrated. There was some stutters and crashes in the VR version at least, which is kind of annoying, but overall it's a good game, and I'm going to give it an 8.08. Overall, EVP has been relatively good this past 15 years or so. That being said, I would like to see more innovative games like Alien Isolation going forward, as well as more than one and a third Predator games. Thank you to anyone who likes, comments, or subscribes. That's it.